Do schools kill creativity? We have no idea where this world will be or what it'll look like in 10 years. And yet, we are trying to educate children for it today.
Hello, I'm Linnetta.
I'm Patrick.
And together we are co-founders of
Vertical Connections, Inc.
Thank you for joining us once again. Be sure to subscribe, click the like button, and continue to share.
Yes, and thank you so much for all the times that you're leaving comments and sharing some of your viewpoints or your experiences. We love to hear those and love to see those, so thank you so much for doing that. Everyone has an interest in education.
We can all agree children have extraordinary capacities.
Yes, and in that capacity, there is the ability for innovation.
Yes. All kids have tremendous talent, but
Yes.
we, as adults, find ourselves putting a squash on them, squandering their freedom for creativity.
When we look at education and creativity, we should see that creativity is as important as literacy and treat it the same way.
Yes, many schools now are finding ways to cut, and they've been doing this for years. You would think that they would learn, it would be learned, that taking that stuff away is not good. You find so many adults who have produced things because of creativity.
Right. We see that the curriculums are printed out and turned into a script and then handed out, and then they are processed through professional development meetings, and all of a sudden they try to create a robot rather than trying to create free thinkers who are willing to be daring and go out and share some of their thoughts. It kind of brings me to a little story about a girl that was 6 years old in her art class. And this little girl, she rarely paid attention to the art teacher, but she loved to draw. So she's sitting in the back of the room and she's drawing to her heart's content. And after the teacher was done sharing whatever the lesson was that she was trying to teach the class that day, and granted, they're 6-year-olds, she goes back to the little girl and asks her, "What are you drawing today?" And the little girl looked up at the teacher and she said, "I'm drawing a picture of God." The teacher scrunched up her face, looked at the little girl and said, "Nobody knows what God looks like though." And the little girl said, "Just wait, in a minute they will." And I just think that's so cute, because here's this little girl who is just drawing and sharing what she feels inside of her at that moment. And it's art class. And she comes up and that teacher asks her a question, and like we found out so many times, if you don't want to know the answer, be careful on the water you tread, because they're going to give you an answer. And it's so cute how she just responded, "You wait." So
being wrong is not the same as being creative.
no.
But if we are not prepared to be wronged, we will never open the doors for creativity.
By the time that we become adults, it seems as though that creativity is lost. It's almost trained out of us because we become frightened of being wrong.
Yes. Or we start comparing ourselves with others instead of honing in on that special gift that you can provide.
We see it as in the way that companies are being run. The companies will stigmatize those that are wrong. They draw it out. They make sure that the individual understands that that is not how it's done, and we shouldn't be doing it any other way than what has already been prefaced in the beginning or from the start. So we have to go from there.
Yes, again, other ways of stifling, squandering someone from being free.
And I think that's kind of cool, because it makes you think of a quote from Picasso where he said, "Every child is an artist." The problem is having them remain an artist as they grow up. And if you think about that, that is so true. I mean, you will have some that will be doodlers and scribblers and scratchers, but in the essence, they're not being on task And so then they get reprimanded for that rather than seeing the creativity that they might be exploring.
And as teachers, I understand we have a timeline. We have things we have to get done, and the kids have to get it done. But we also need to find that way, find that space for that child or those children to be able to create. And a lot of times they find that in special classes like the music class, PE classes, the art classes, communications class. They find that in those classes. So when you see that the education systems are cutting those things out, do you really care about the children?
Or is it just a business?
Mm.
It's so sad. I mean, we've been listening and hearing friends who are still teaching, and they brought that very fact to the point where not only are they cutting back teachers, but then they're limiting the amount of time for those special classes, those arts, that PE, the music. And not only so they trim down the time, but then they spread the teachers out thinner. And that's not going to give quality or produce quality. That's going to produce somebody who is just trying to check boxes off. I got this done today.
Mm-hmm.
I got to this school today.
And yet they're supposed to do self-care.
Mm.
Kind of hard to do that when you got people running here and there to and fro. It's not going to happen.
And we were talking earlier about when we think about being wrong. I know that growing up back in the 70s when I was in school, and 80s for you, but there would be the time where we would get our work handed back to us, and we would see the red ink coming a mile away down the aisle as the teacher was coming to pass them out. I mean, I know that personally my paper was not red ink free. So when I got it, the first thing you'd see is a great big minus sign and tell me, how many did you miss? But as teachers, we found out that we had a similar mentality.
Yes, when it came time for me to grade children's work, I made sure to get rid of the red pen and also to put plus signs on, meaning what you did right. Yes, we're going to work on the other stuff, but I want you to know that you are heading in the right direction.
How many successes did they have? That was the main thing up there. We wanted to make sure that they saw you got this many right, and it was a positive thing, versus putting that red ink on there and the big negative sign, and this is how many you got wrong. So that's kind of a little bit of our history and the fact that how we would try and encourage kids. Also in math, I know that my colleagues and I, we would sit down in our meetings and we would discuss how can we show our students that their time and their efforts are worth something. And so we would actually in math give them credit for showing their work. Now their work had to definitely at least exemplify something that was pertaining to the question being asked. But if they would show a sense of vulnerability when they didn't know for sure, and they would put that work down, we would go ahead and give them credit for that. And then the next class period, after they were corrected, we would go and we would cut off all the names and we'd put together different slides of all the examples, and then we'd have the kids come together and collaborate and discuss, what do you see is wrong here? But they did it together, and then we would talk about how could it be corrected and what could they do the next time to make it so that this was correct throughout the entire problem.
So a problem solving.
Absolutely.
Whether it's in small group or big group, problem solving, so that when something else comes up, you can work through the process of problem solving.
And then you'd also find different ways to get the same answer. These kids would collaborate and share some thoughts, or this is what I thought, or this is how I did it. And the next thing you know, a whole new area of confidence would grow. And it was just amazing to see that.
Yes, on those lines, I loved in music class when we had our different instruments and it was time for kids to create their own music, create using instruments that were given to them. Yes, there's always boundaries. Let's be real and honest all the time. There are boundaries because we need safe and we need kids to understand there's a way to do everything. And if you have a different way of doing it and it's going to help, add addition to, make people go, I never thought of it that way. We're open to that. That's always awesome to hear other people's different ideas. It's wonderful.
We are set up to make mistakes, and yet we are also set up to receive correction. We know that if you take it as critiquing rather than just correcting, you're going to take it personally and you're going to feel negative. And also along those lines, you want to make sure that we are building their confidence and getting them to share their innovative side.
Never lying. Don't lie to them.
No.
The kids always say, I'm going to tell you the truth. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yes.
But I'm also going to show you and help you to open up your mindset so that you can explore different ways to get on board so that it comes to be better.
Yes. And I just want to close with another story. And this one was from Sir Ken Robinson. And he was a professor who moved from England and came over to the United States with his family. And this individual was also an author. And one of the books he wrote was called Epiphany. And it was all about a series of interviews he did with individuals and how they discovered their talents. And he had the opportunity that when he was in England, he actually sat on the board, a big board for ballet. And so he got to interview a person by the name of Jillian Lynn. Now, a lot of you might not know who Jillian Lynn is, but let me tell you a little bit about her background up until the point where a lot of people now know her. So when she was 8 years old, she was a student who would really struggle with sitting still, with getting homework done. She was often doing things that were not what the teacher was hoping for. And back in the 1930s, her parents received this letter from the school stating that she had a learning disability. So in that letter, they also thought that to help her out, they should take her to a specialist. Now, the mother, of course, doing what all good mothers will do, well, if my child has a problem, I better go find out. So she took her to the specialist. And while sitting there for about 20 minutes, this doctor interviewed the little girl and talked to the mother about all of the problems she was having in school, the disruption, the late homework, etc., etc. And the whole time, this little girl's sitting on her hands, doing the best she can to be attentive and not distract others. So finally, at the end of discussing this with the parent and while the child is sitting there, the doctor goes and sits by Jillian and tells her, Jillian, I just need a moment with your mom in private. And we're going to go out in the hallway. So if you wouldn't mind, just sit here for a minute. So as the two adults got up and left the room, the doctor walked by, turned on the radio on his desk. And as they got into the hallway, there was a window, and he told the mother, let's just watch and see. And as soon as they had gotten out into the hallway, this little girl got up and she was dancing and moving and loving the music and just feeling it. And the doctor looked at the mother and said, she's not sick. She's a dancer.
Awesome.
So what you need to do is take her to a dance school. So what do you think the mom did? Took her to a dance school. Now, this person, this Jillian Lynn, grew up. She was extremely gifted in dance and ballet. She was at the top of her class. She ended up starting the Jillian Lynn Academy for Ballet and Dance. And today she is known, or after she had the dance hall school, she then met
Andrew Lloyd Webber.
Oh my goodness, the person who wrote Cats and Phantom of the Opera. Jillian Lynn is the choreographer for both of those.
Now go home and watch those, please.
Oh my goodness.
Pay attention to all the choreography. The little girl who was supposed to, be put on drugs or something?
Oh my gosh. Make sure that we medicate her. Make sure that we subdue her. Make sure that we put her in this box and have her do all the academics that she's supposed to be partaking in. No. Go ahead. Let her continue to experience all of that inside creativity.
And sure, there are times, I'm just thinking back in the classroom, there are times when the kids, there's a time for this and a time for that, but you have got to let the kid know that we're going to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do this. But don't just say, oh, you can't do that, That is horrible for the teacher, because they're being told to tell the kids to do that because we have a timeline to meet, and it's squandering those creative thoughts.
Juices.
Yes.
Yes. So we just thank you so much for sharing in this. Please remember to give that opportunity to the children. Build them up, allow them to seek out their creativity. And then also, as you see adults, don't always think that wrong answers are the worst thing in the world, because out of wrong can come some wonderful ideas.
So that would mean we as adults, as parents, we need to learn how to respond versus react.
Absolutely.
Find the avenues to allow for that creativity. Learn from others who are more educated in the area of helping children to grow and experience and have fun.
So, until next time,
get connected to go vertical.
See you next time. Bye.